Hi, I'm Tim. Welcome to Watchbox, and thanks for logging on. If you love this watch, email me, tmosso@thewatchbox.com. It's in the description below. Your purchase and pricing email question line for buying this or any watch you might see on any Watchbox platform. Reach out to me directly for pricing, tmosso@thewatchbox.com. Redesigned for 2021, albeit subtly, this is the Rolex Oyster Perpetual 36, reference 126000. So the watch is 36 millimeters in diameter. It's 11.6 millimeters thick from lug to lug tip. It is 43.5 millimeters, and from end link to end link, the total distance across the wrist is 45.5 millimeters. We have a 20 millimeter spacing between the lugs. I will throw it on my wrist, which is 16 centimeters in circumference. It wears nicely. This is for him or for her, and you can see that quite obviously. It's a good size, and it's a size I happen to prefer over the larger options. It's also thin enough, especially with the domed bezel, that it'll slide underneath the cuff. So it is a sports watch, but it's a sporty watch that can dress up without any kind of qualms of looking jarring or dissonant in formal attire. This watch is made for it. Taking a quick look at the bracelet and the clasp, you can see that this version of the Oyster bracelet features satin tops and only polished flanks. So unlike, for example, a Submariner or a GMT bracelet, which would have polished center links, here everything on the tops is satin. We have conforming end links. There's no gap between bracelet and case. We have removable links that, as you can see, are fixed by screws. We also have a clasp that is finished internally, thick gauge metal internally. We've come a long way since the stamped Oyster clasps of the 90s. We have a beacon to hook, so this actually latches shut. And to open it, you need to unlatch it. It's not friction fit. You don't pry it open, you unlock it. It's a very secure system, and it is deceptively complex internally. Now we have, as you can see, an embossed, stamped down Rolex 5-point coronet and satin tops on the buckle with polished flanks, just like we have on the links. Internally, for the first time, the 2021 version of the Oyster Perpetual gets EasyLink, which is a 5mm tool-free in and out adjustment system. It's the equivalent of adding or removing one sizable link. And you can see that we still have the 3 divots inside the clasp. You can use your strap tool to change the anchoring point of the bracelet inside the clasp. So you have 3 ways to size: EasyLink, the divots, and then the removable links. Rolex makes its own cases and its own alloys. It has its own case, bracelet, and clasp factory, and it uses 904L steel. So not only does Rolex make the part, but it makes the material of which the part is made. 904L steel isn't harder than standard 316. What it is more resistant to corrosion, in particular corrosion caused by certain industrial acids, and more to the point for a user, salt. So sea salt or sweat, this watch is not going to corrode, whereas sometimes with sufficient exposure and a lack of rinsing, 316 can begin to corrode. So this is 904L. We have a twin lock crown in steel, screw-down crown, 100-meter water resistance, domed bezel, high polish, simple case flank, polished, satinated lug hoods. This is a direct descendant of the 1933 Oyster Perpetual, lovingly nicknamed Bubbleback. It was the first time Rolex combined its Oyster water-resistant case with its Perpetual rotor winding system. And this watch, as a result, is part of a model line that has been in the collection since 20 years prior to the debut of the first Rolex Submariner. So this is really the heart and soul of Rolex. We have indices, Rolex crown, and hands in 18-karat white gold because it will not tarnish, oxidize, or fade over time. The dial base is black lacquer. And as you can see, the watch uses Rolex's own Lume. Rolex makes its own Lume. It is called Chromalight, and it is distinctively blue. I particularly like the doubled indices at 3, 6, and 9 o'clock. Turning the watch over, you can see it has a typical Oyster screwed-in, double-finished case back, and in there is Caliber 3230, next-generation Rolex automatic. It does away with the old winding system's vulnerable jeweled staff by adding a rotor bearing for greater shock tolerance. Power reserve goes from 48 to 70 hours. We still have 31 pivot jewels, 8 beats per second, a free sprung balance, and a full balance bridge, those last 2 features making the watch more shock tolerant. The movement is a COSC certified Swiss chronometer, but Rolex cases up the chronometer caliber and tests it as a fully assembled watch in 6 positions to run no worse than -2 + 2 seconds per day. They call that the superlative chronometer standard. Now Rolex also uses a Breguet overcoil hairspring, and that hairspring has a very centered mass, so in any position it will breathe concentrically, allowing the watch to keep excellent time in any position on your wrist or your dresser at night. Also important to note, the watch has a stop seconds or hacking system, so you can set it precisely against a reference time, and that overcoil hairspring is made of a blue oxidized niobium zirconium alloy Rolex calls Parachrome Blue that is highly anti-magnetic. Rolex makes everything. It even makes the Paraflex shock protection systems and the very lubricants that are used in this movement. Reach out to Tim Mosso at thewatchbox.com for purchase and pricing details.